You're watching News 24 Live. It's Monday, the 8th of June. I'm joined in studio by Sport 24 editor Garen Lamley and chief writer Rob Howing to do a recap of the weekend's sports results. Gents, good morning and welcome to the roundtable.
Hello, Nick.
Morning, Nick. So yeah, a lot went on this weekend. We had the Roland Garros final, Champions League final, but let's start on the rugby front. Rob, what did this weekend's results mean for the overall log and playoff spots with one round to go? First draw of the season between the Stormers and the Lions, and then of course the Bulls bowing out. I don't think anyone expected that, or did they?
I suppose in some respects, yes. I mean, the danger signs I thought flashed even before the game. They were 0 from 3 overseas and playing some pretty turgid rugby, quite frankly. They continued with that trend. The fact is they were probably robbed by a dreadful TMO decision when Berger Odendaal looked very clearly as though he'd put it this way, it looked far more like as though it was a try than it wasn't a try. And you know, the attacking team in that instance really should have been given the advantage. So the Bulls would have been hopping mad about that. They probably would have stayed vaguely in contention if they'd managed to get over the line in that match, because their last home game is against the Cheetahs. As it is, that's now completely academic. Bulls have blown it big time. Lots of question marks around the future of the current regime at Loftus. Their fans are pretty angry about the situation. But we've been left basically with a weekend where, as we perhaps feared, the Lions sadly have finally bowed out after a very, very plucky attempt to make the playoffs, and South Africa down to one side. Same as last year, and probably the same situation as we had where the Sharks actually slipped last year into that horrible third position. So you don't get a guaranteed home semi-final, and there's a very good chance now that unless 3 results go the Stormers' way next weekend, they're also going to have to play a qualifier first, which could be a serious banana peel game because there are some tough teams above them in that top 6. And then an away semi-final. So from a South African point of view, I'm afraid our chances of getting a first title since the advent of the conference system in 2011 are not looking very rosy. The Stormers are going to have to defy history, basically, probably, to get there. Unless, of course, 3 results go their way next weekend. They beat the Sharks in Durban, and the Waratahs and the Brumbies both lose their home matches next weekend. That's a tricky little scenario to envisage. I think secretly the Stormers will be planning now for that dreaded sort of quarterfinal, that extra game. Okay, it's an extra Newlands match, which is pleasing for their fans. They'll get a nice crowd for it, but it's a tough route now for them to go all the way. You have to give them some credit for winning the conference. It's their 3rd conference success in the 5 years of the competition now. So they have been the most consistent South African side, and look reasonably well set for a decent Currie Cup at Newlands as well, I would think, although they'll probably surrender a few Springboks. But generally speaking, another below par Super Rugby ordinary season for the South African teams.
Garen, what did you make of it? I remember at the beginning of the season, the Bulls actually were looking like the sort of front runners. I mean, so yeah, they've bowed out. Stormers the one shining light. But yeah, like as Rob mentioned, not an easy sort of route now to a potential final. South African sides, I mean, is the conference system sort of, has it counted against them, or is it just a bad sort of slump in franchise rugby? Or
you know, it's very difficult to actually say. I remember, you know, pre-season we sort of looked at the season. We thought the Bulls and the Sharks would be the 2 strongest South African teams, with maybe the Stormers and the Lions, you know, the next tier, and then the Cheetahs to finish last. And pretty much the only thing we got right was the fact that Cheetahs finished last. As it turns out, the Stormers and the Lions were the ones battling for the top spot. You know, when you look at the South African conference, it's definitely, to my mind, the weakest of the lot. You know, the Cheetahs are fairly poor. And you would think that with everyone in the conference having to play everyone else twice, if you've got a couple of weak teams, that'll certainly guarantee, you know, 10 points maybe for the top strong sides. When you look at the New Zealand conference, they're all pretty much competitive. Even the Blues, you know, this year haven't been at their best, but they're still, you know, have only lost most of their matches by less than 7 points. But it seems that with the New Zealand 3 teams through, that it doesn't really matter if you have top sides playing each other week after week. You beat each other and you're still picking up points. So it seems to have worked again for them. 3 teams through, you know, it gives them extra play at the highest level, which is fantastic in a World Cup year. You know, they're playing more and more matches.
And one of them not the Crusaders.
So and that's the thing, you know, so they're really like spread around the strength and the talent in New Zealand. And the Crusaders, you know, they very nearly made it into the you know the back end of the playoffs. You know, they finished the season strongly. You know, they've got a tough match this weekend coming against the Brumbies, but even if they win that, I think they finish 7th. So if you think about 4 New Zealand teams in the top 7, that's quite staggering, considering there was only 1 South African you know, in the top 7, which is pretty much the top half of the table when, you know, with 15 teams. So certainly not a great season again from the South African teams. It is worrying, picking up a number of injuries.
Yeah, and in a World Cup year.
In the World Cup year, you know, some players will, you know, the management, Springbok management will probably think, you know, a couple of extra weeks to rest these players. But I get the feeling that these players want to play. Certainly if you're on the fringe of selection, you want to play your way into the team. You don't want to be sitting on the bench or your team's not in the playoffs. So it certainly doesn't help everyone that there is this you know, these weeks rest. So yeah, a lot of worrying aspects for me in this World Cup year. You know, the Rugby Championship, again, won't really tell us that much. It's a much shortened tournament, 1 match against each of the other teams, either home or away, not home and away. Again, we're not going to learn much from that. We're playing a World 15 game, which we would win in any year, no matter who the opposition is. So I think we're going to go into this World Cup a little bit cold. You know, we've had 2 training camps, and I think more than half the players are out injured at both of them. So we can't really have, you know, learned much from that. So certainly worrying. I'd be far happier if I was a New Zealand fan at the moment, to be honest.